Hello and welcome to How to Deal When the Shit Gets Real podcast. I'm Rietta.
And I'm Connie, and today we are here with KP. So KP, how do you deal when shit gets real? But really, just introduce yourself to our listeners.
All right. Well, my name is KP. I am the host of the Morning Formation, but a little bit about me and my background. I was born in Wahiawa, Hawaii, and my father was in the military for 20 years. And then when he retired, my parents divorced. I ended up going and living in the soybean fields of Ohio.
That's quite a change from Hawaii.
Well,
yeah.
a lot of people don't realize how big the change is because it's you go from the pidgin English to speaking, hello, how are you today? Like, hey, brother, what's up? The stuff over there. Like, and then you go to that from like, hello, how are you? Like, how is the day going for you? So huge change, huge culture change. A lot of the kids, when I first moved, thought that Hawaii was like a complete different country. And
that's insane.
Yeah. And even teachers that I had thought that it was, so early on, it was huge diversity change for me. And then went through high school in the state of Ohio and then joined the National Guard, enlisted. Went to college there in Ohio and then got my commissioned and did 4 years additional active duty in the Army as an officer. And
surprised you stay in Hawaii for so long. Or not in Hawaii. Oh my God, Ohio. I'd been like, bye.
But you know what though? When you grow up somewhere like that, you don't appreciate it as much. You always think like the mainland is like so much better and so much more going on. But as you get older, you wish that you had. Right.
So what was your job as an officer in the Army, right?
Yeah. So okay. I was truly an ordnance officer, and that it's interesting. We kind of talked about it before, but I wish I had gone infantry or combat arms because the reason I didn't was because my father was drafted for Vietnam and he ended up not going to Vietnam. He ended up finishing up Ranger School and being a grunt. And so when it came time for me to choose which branch to go into, he pushed me away from combat arms and said, oh, you need to get into some type of logistical field. That way, when you get out, companies are going to be looking at that, like saying, oh, wow, look at this guy, he can do logistics or whatever. And so blindly, I was just like, yeah, sure. But if I could go back, I probably would rather do the combat arms grunt type stuff, only because you get a lot more opportunities to do the different schools that the military offers.
Yeah, there are a lot of schools. My husband has taken advantage of a lot of them. He's actually at one right now. And it's kind of interesting to see them. Like, obviously, I don't experience it the same as they do, but it's interesting to see how they do offer courses and they go through different things. So I could understand missing out on that.
Yeah, the Marines is a little different than the Army. Like the Army, we have all these pretty badges that we put on our uniforms and stuff, and we go around. With the Marines, they just go to the courses, get the certs, and then they still wear their name tapes, and that's about it.
So what inspired you to start interviewing military personnel on your podcast?
Oh, well, that's actually a really good question. So what inspired me to interview people on my podcast is I felt like when I transitioned out of the military, there wasn't a whole lot of help. We had like some kind of like right there on base in Schofield Barracks in Hawaii, there was a transitional like group that you had to go through like your last 2 weeks of out processing. You went through this training where like they showed you how to do resumes. It was pretty generic. It was like checking the block more or less. And so my experience was when I got out of the military, I had my master's in science administration. At the time I was a captain. I was an 03. And so I thought I was pretty marketable. And I decided to go with a headhunter, which out there on the private side, they have these businesses that specifically work with military officers and high-ranking NCOs, and they try to place you in jobs. And so I went with one and interviewed with like 7 different companies. And don't get me wrong, they got me ready as far as, interviewing and whatnot. But when it came down to it and my time started getting short, I only had one choice, and it was to work for this aeronautics company. And so it wasn't really what I wanted. I really wanted to get into sales, and I ended up in operations for an aeronautics company. And what happened was there was like they went on this hiring kick where they hired like 7 military officers from like different branches, so Navy, Air Force, Marines, Army, and some people that got hired on were very impressive people that went to like the to the academies and had a lot of experience. So anyways, they hired all 7 of us on board. The HR team did, but when they handed us over to the management team, they weren't on board. They basically put us in different parts of the business that were going to die. So like, for example, the place that I managed was in about a year and a half was going to get completely like taken away, and the budget was going to be gone. So I could see the writing on the wall. Like I was probably going to end up either transferring somewhere else or getting fired. But the fact that they took all of us and put us in these like places that no one else wanted to work, I thought was pretty disrespectful, because we sat there for about a year. We were all frustrated. Like we'd talk to each other, and we would sit there and watch like these other like college kids come in, and because they were part of a certain college and certain fraternities and sororities, they would get these awesome jobs that had like upward mobility, upward movement. Mm-hmm. So for me, I started doing the podcast mainly because I felt like military people, when they get out, there's a lot of flag waving going on, but there's not a lot of
actual help.
true respect, actual help. And I think that at the end of the day, a lot of us military folks, we need to share our experiences with each other to try to avoid those pitfalls. So, and I really feel like today as a whole, our media, our society, we kind of honor the things that aren't as important as other things. So, I think a few weeks ago that I think in the media, one of the big things that was, at least out here on the West Coast, was they were talking about Lady Gaga's dog walker. Mm-hmm. And it was just like,
okay.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, cool. But like,
no one cares.
Like, there's like real heroes out there doing real things, but you only hear about them for like a minute. So I just wanted to have like a place where military people could help each other out, but also give us like a podium where we can talk about our experiences and share with, what we've done, because I served in Operation Iraqi Freedom. And while it doesn't seem it was that far away, that I came back from deployment and served that deployment, it really is. Like there's a lot of people today that kind of forget about Afghanistan and Iraq and even September 11th.
Yep. They forget about a lot of things, Benghazi, everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
I was doing something for work, and the expiration date was September 11th. I was like, this shouldn't even be allowed to be an expiration date. Yeah. I was like, what is this? Like, I wanted to call the person and be like, hey, you realize this expires September 11th. That's rude. Next.
No, it's amazing sometimes, like people, when they ask you questions about, Iraq, Afghanistan, even September 11th, like why they don't, things that they don't know, like why things happened or how they happened. And it's like, well, you should know this. Like, this is very basic, like American history, like 101 type stuff. And it wasn't that long ago.
No, yeah, it wasn't.
And actually, it's insane. So my husband's older than me, and I can't remember like what grade he was in. And somebody tried to tell him, no, you weren't in that grade. You can't remember September 11th. And he's like, dude, I'm 32. I for sure remember September 11th. Like, was like, don't like, that's insane. Like, I watched the news in my classroom and you're telling me that I couldn't? That's insane. I was like, what?
I definitely remember where I was. I was in high school, so I absolutely remember where I was.
Yeah, I was in college.
I was very young. I just remember my mom putting on the news and telling me not to look because she didn't want me to see the explosion, like, because it was just on rerun on the news. She didn't really want me to see that. Yeah. That's the only thing that I remember.
Yeah, I remember I was hungover I think I was a sophomore. I was a sophomore in college at the time, and I think it was 8 a.m, man. I was watching this stuff, and I was still a little bit hungover. But at the time I was in the National Guard, I was enlisted. And so of course every single guard unit out there got put on alert, or whatever. But pretty unreal. So when I decided to continue my military service and become an officer, like I knew very well that my chances of deploying to Afghanistan or Iraq was highly likely to happen.
Mhm.
Yeah. And since you're talking about that, why did you decide to join the military? I know you kind of touched on it, but do you want to go into it more?
So that's interesting, actually. So I'm going to take it all the way back to like growing up, right? So when I grew up, my dad was in the military. My mom and dad had a terrible, terrible relationship. And it was a very domestically violent situation, like growing up. And when my dad got out of the military, and I decided to live with him. So then here I am in Ohio now. And all growing up, I got terrible grades. And it was mainly because of my home life. I mean, we're talking about, I was kicked back and forth between my parents. Like there was a time, long story short, a time where I lived in like a women's shelter. I lived in a camper for a long time, like places where like you wouldn't be too proud to live. I mean, I remember in 8th grade, I think it was, when I was living in a women's shelter, I would leave my school and my friends would try to follow me home. And I remember walking around town for like, this is in a small town in Ohio, walking around town for hours, just waiting for them to get hungry and go home so I could go and sneak back to my place. Right. So I didn't grow up in the best of conditions. And with that being said, I didn't get the best grades growing up. And for me, I was always told that I wasn't good enough. I was told that, because I was special ed as well. So I went to the little special classroom and where I goofed off and, didn't do work, and they allowed me to goof off. And so anyways, going into high school, when I moved back in with my dad, like I said, I was kicked back and forth. So when I moved back in with my father, that's when things started settling down for me. But at this time I was 16, 17 years old. My dad remarried, found a very lovely woman that was actually grounded. He's still with her today. And so I was able to focus more on school at that point. I could see like the end was coming, as far as the goofing off. And that's when I buckled down. I, spent 9 years in special education classes, and I was able to test out of it. And then my last 2 years of high school, I got, close to a 4.0 GPA. And I got more involved in like sports and theater, and I tried my best because I knew at that point I wanted to go to college. I was the youngest out of all the kids in my family. I have like three half brothers and sisters, and for the most part, they all grew up and they weren't able to do a whole lot with themselves, whether it be drugs or prison, things of that nature. And so I could see ahead of me like what I didn't want to happen to me, and I wasn't able to get my GPA up enough to get a scholarship at the end of high school. And my dad is an old hard ass Ranger. He was just like, he's like, well, son, he goes, you weren't smart enough to get a scholarship, so you can go to a community college, you can live here, but house rules. And I'm like, hell no. So yeah, I called up an Army recruiter, and that's when I had the active duty Army recruiter come over, and then my dad stepped in and was like, yo, if you decide to go in the military, I want you to get your college degree first. So that's when I looked into the reserves and National Guard, and just so happened that one of my old football coaches was a National Guard recruiter. And it was an awesome program where they had, they offered, if you enlisted, they offered 100% tuition assistance. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was really good. So my junior year, I literally went to MEPS on my own. It's funny because I have friends now that tell me, they're like, you know what, you signed up for the National Guard and you didn't say anything to anyone. Like you just went to MEPS on your own and signed up, and then finished my senior year. And 3 days after graduating, I was in basic training. And it's funny because you would think that if you had a father that was in the Army and he was a drill sergeant for 5 years, you would think that I would understand or know like what I was getting into. I had no idea. Like I go to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and I don't know what the hell I was thinking. Like I really don't. Like I look back now and I was thinking, what was I expecting? Like I literally went to Fort Leonard Wood. I went to Fort Leonard Wood, and they put us on these cattle trucks and was like yelling at us, and it was like chaotic as hell. But growing up with a hard ass dad like I did, I was kind of used to the discipline side of things and kind of thinking ahead and planning and organizing. And so a lot of my life skills helped me through, basic training and stuff. So I did very well in basic training. But I don't know. It's just so weird because I didn't expect to get yelled at like that, like from drill sergeants. Like, and I'm thinking, what the hell was I thinking? That I think it was gonna be like summer camp or what? But stupid me, man. I think I was just on cruise control.
You never watched Full Metal Jacket?
No, I never did. I never watched like the military movies growing up.
Oh my God.
Nah. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's good that I didn't know, because then I would have probably psyched myself out.
True. It was meant to be that you didn't know.
Yeah. But I mean,
my brother was the same way, like on cruise control, and was like, I don't know what to do.
Right.
And went to the military, and I think he thought it was going to be like a camp, like a training camp. And then it was way different than he actually thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it was a good experience because I came back in the fall. And, that's when football games are going off. And, I just graduated the year before. So I come back, and that's when I learned early on, like, what progression looks like. Because I came back from basic training, and most of my friends acted like they had just seen me last week. I was asking them, so what did you do all summer? And they were like, oh, I don't know. Drank.
Nothing.
Like, smoked weed. Nothing.
Mhm.
Like, and I'm like, Jesus, like I went through all this, I did all these different things, and I was like, wow. And so that would kind of mirror itself again when I went on my deployment, like out of college. Like I can't, when I come back from deployment and I go back to an old pub that I used to go to all the time, and I see the same old people sticking to the chairs and stuff, just drinking the same beer. And I walk in and I'm just like, what's up?
Nothing has changed.
They're like, what's up? They're like, you guys act like you just saw me last week. I've been gone for a year. They're like, where you been? I'm like, Iraq.
It's like a time warp. It's like you step back in time.
It's amazing how much, people don't realize, how much time they waste, and how much the military can really accelerate your overall career, I guess, and just things that you can learn, skill sets and things of that nature.
Can you tell us exact your steps in the military, like the different things that you did, because you were the reserves, all that stuff? Because I don't know the jargon. Sorry, guys.
No, it's all good. Yeah, so the National Guard is the National Guard is interesting because it's actually ran by the state and the national government. So any kind of like state natural disasters that happen, things of that nature, the state can call on you to help take care of that stuff. And the reserves is kind of owned by only the federal government. So when I joined the National Guard, the state of Ohio was actually offering the 100% tuition. It's still considered military, and you can still deploy to like, any kind of like Afghanistan or Iraq. But back then, this was in 98, 99, we weren't in any conflicts at the time. So it didn't look promising that you were going to go anywhere because we weren't involved in anything. And then there's so many different programs. So you're talking about the steps, right? So I enlisted in the National Guard, went to basic training, went to my advanced training, was drilling 1 week in a month while going to college full time. I think it was close to my junior year, my platoon sergeant told me, he's like, well, why don't you consider, because I would go to my unit and I would just do my job. Like I didn't complain. I just went and did my job and got promoted fairly quick there. My platoon sergeant said, why don't you consider becoming an officer since you're in college right now? And I was like, yeah, I'll look into it. So I went to my ROTC department, and that's when I learned about a program. It was called the Simultaneous Membership Program, like a green to gold program. That's where I signed up my junior year to become a cadet. So I went from being enlisted to being a cadet. And what a cadet is a officer in training. I still drilled at my unit, but I wore like this little pip, like a little round disc instead of the actual ranks. And it's kind of an interesting shift because you're not an officer, but you're not enlisted. So technically you're supposed to be rendered as an officer, but it's kind of a joke type thing because you're still, they call them cadidiots when you're a cadet. You're a cadetiot because you're an idiot, right? And you're a cadet. So anyways, finished up my college. And then that's the day that I got my bachelor's degree was the day that I pinned on my butter bar, which is my second lieutenant rank. And I became a commissioned officer. And then I went active duty. And then I was stationed with 25th at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii. And then I had to finish my officer's course. And then, of course, then I went, active duty. And then I went to Hawaii. And then that's when I got my deployment orders right off the bat.
And Connie, just so you know, I don't know if you know about drilling. Like they pretty much, it's like them practicing one weekend out of the month.
Yeah, I actually had to take military history for my bachelor's degree, so I do know what drilling is.
Just make sure you knew that part.
Is that your major?
Yes.
History?
I don't do anything with history, but yes, I am. I did graduate with a history degree.
But you know what though? I really wish I had a history degree because I feel like when they make you study history, like you learn so much.
You do.
Yes. I mean, it's also at a college level when it's not just your prereqs, your freshman and sophomore year. Like freshman and sophomore year, your history that you have to take. Right. That's really like names and dates, whatever. And then when you get to your junior and senior year, it's more of like how to form an argument, arguing history, arguing like little tiny details of history. It's more in depth and less just here are names and dates. So it's really cool in that respect because like when I did military history, like it was super in depth on every conflict that we've been in. Mm-hmm. So it's less just like, yep, here are some names and dates, and more of now tell me why. So that's why I like it though, because I feel like especially today people don't know. We just talked about it, like even like history from 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. Let alone history from 1950 and on.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
And you've also experienced it more because your dad was in Vietnam, so that's something that you can't forget because you remember your dad going through it, so you're more in touch with history than a lot of people are because it hasn't touched their lives. Our grandparents all witnessed World War II, so they can't forget that history because they were a part of it.
Right.
Well, and actually everybody, because I had a history major, everybody assumed I was going to be like a lawyer or something. Because if you're not on the like history education track, people just assume that you're going to go be like a lawyer, a politician, because they teach you how to do a correct argument. But yeah, it is a decent major. My one teacher used to say, yeah, you could be in the business department learning how to be a robot and just do your ABCs and whatever you're told to do, or you could be in the history department actually learning how to think for yourself.
So since one of the reasons you started your podcast was helping the transition, and that's and I feel that's an important piece too, because, my husband's active duty and we see a lot of people transition and then once they get out, they don't know what to do and they feel kind of lost. Right. So what's one thing or even multiple things that you wish you knew or that you did or didn't do as you transitioned out of the military?
Yeah, the one thing that I wish, so I got out in 2007. So back then the internet wasn't what it is now. There was no LinkedIn. It wasn't as interactive as it was. I think MySpace was still popular. Oh yeah, I took you guys back there, huh? MySpace. Remember that?
I remember MySpace.
Yeah, you can actually still log into your MySpace, by the way.
Yes.
It's still there.
Mm-hmm. I did the other day just for fun.
I always describe MySpace as kind of that drunk uncle that lives at the end of the lake. That he's there, and he's
you just don't want to remember.
Right. Every now and then you go check on him, and it's he's still there. But yeah. So, and I just wish I would have networked a lot more. I wish that I would have opened myself, because that thing that I told you about, I can't remember what it was called, but the last 2 weeks of out processing, they made you go through this this program where they looked at your resume and they did these mock interviews with you. Well, I had soldiers that came to me and showed me their resumes after they did their editing and reformatting, and I thought it looked horrible. I was like, there's no way I'm going through this. Like, I'm just going to go in there and get checked off. Like, I'm not interested in doing their little stuff. I'm better than that. Like, I can do this on my own.
Mhm.
That's the one thing that I wish I would have been more open to taking the extra, I guess, help, considering, because as I was out processing, I was trying to look for a job in Hawaii and I just didn't have any luck. Because I really did consider staying there. I was working so hard there towards the end of getting my master's degree because, again, I always felt like I was kind of behind the eight ball compared to everyone else. So I knew that looking ahead, that when I got out, I understood that there was going to be like thousands of other officers in my same boat that were going to be looking for jobs as well. And not only that, but these were officers that went to West Point, the Naval Academy, Air Force Academy. And here I am, just ROTC commission, ordnance officer, whatever, that what's going to make me stick out more. So that's when I got my first graduate degree. So I didn't have a whole lot of time to do that networking, so to say, but I wish I'd given myself more time for that specifically. And I wish I would have taken in more help. I really think that when it comes to military veterans, there's just not a whole lot of planning. There's more help today than there ever was, because I think we realized at the turn of the 21st century that was like, the internet coming up and everything, things became way more competitive.
Oh, for
Like,
sure.
gone are the days like where you go back to your little hometown and you get a job at your little factory. There's more of an expectation to, put in for these jobs online, and they're super competitive because
Mhm.
somebody stationed in Bahrain today could fill out that
Mhm.
application too and be more competitive than you. As military veterans, we have to transition to be competitive with the rest of the world. Yeah, if I could go back, that'd be the one thing, is just network, which is easy to do on LinkedIn. And so I've been digging into that a lot more lately, trying to learn the value of LinkedIn and networking with different people, different organizations, things of that nature.
Anyway, so as I was saying, I know the Marine Corps has changed because they've actually added in a program. I think it's called TAP, Transition Assistance Program, to try to help Marines transition. But like you talked about, a lot of them either A, don't know about the program, B, don't take it seriously, or C, just want to get it signed off and they just don't actually care about it. And then they get out and it's like, oh shit, probably should have used that TAP program and I would have be better off.
A lot of people also have the belief too that if they go in the military and they just do their time, then when they come out, people are going to kind of throw job applications at their feet and they're going to be offered all these positions. Well, I got news for you. Like, when I got out, don't get me wrong, the HR generalist that signed me on to work for that aeronautics company did an excellent job. Like, I could tell she inherently cared about hiring military veterans and valued us. But when they turned us over to management, they just threw us to the four winds. And there were times where me and another buddy of mine who I met over there, he was actually a West Point graduate, very smart guy, ended up getting his MBA from Ohio State, works for like an executive right now. He quit the aeronautics company and moved on to greater, bigger and better things. But him and I tried to join. There was like an early professional network program where young professionals can go in and network with each other and socialize or whatever. So me and him, like, we went to some of these events, and because we didn't, I'm just going to say the names of the colleges, because we didn't go to Purdue, Notre Dame, because this was in Indianapolis. So because we didn't go to one of those colleges there locally and we weren't part of a specific fraternity or sorority, like, we were outcasted. Like, nobody wanted to, they're like, hey, we introduce ourselves, and then that was it. Like, there was no interest in like getting us to, like, involved in anything. So,
Which is ridiculous that like you have to be from a certain school to be able to qualify.
yeah. And so we noticed that, and those same graduates that were coming in were getting put in these positions that were awesome positions. Like, they were quality control positions, like positions that were actually in the office. Meanwhile, me and my buddy, we were out on the floor managing union workers. And if you've ever worked in a shop before with union workers, that's a far cry from like the military, because
Oh yeah.
you can't tell people what to do. Like,
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, first week I got a grievance for because I moved a filing cabinet in my own cubicle.
That's crazy.
How dare you rearrange your cubicle?
And I was sweeping, and I got grievances on that. And they're like, "That's somebody else's job," and I'm just like, "Well, I didn't know. Like, what whose job is it then? Oh, well, you got to fill out this form, and then you got to turn it in. Like, really?
There's a lot of corporate BS.
Just to move this, 3 feet that way, I got to do that. Like, I can't sweep my own cubicle." So, I mean, I think a lot of the other supervisors that were there too saw the young military folks coming in as a threat. I mean, at the time I was 27 years old, had a master's degree, and a lot of the other guys there that were supervisors like me, were lucky to have a bachelor's degree. I actually caught one of them one day talking some smack. Came around the corner of a machine, and he said, I heard him say this. He said something about, oh, they hire all these military rejects, and I was like, really? And so
Real rude. Yeah.
Yes. So we had a little
Rude.
conversation, but that was just kind of an insight on how we were viewed. We weren't really, in my opinion, there were people there that respected us and appreciated us, but there were a lot of people there. It wasn't like in the military where we mentor each other, we help each other out.
Right.
They saw us as a threat.
It's hard
See,
to
and if-
find that in a corporate job in general. In any
Yeah, it
job,
is.
finding like an actual team to work with versus people just trying to claw their way up and they don't care who gets
Yeah.
in the way
Yeah.
or
And
how
see,
rude they are.
and I feel like your military experience, if anything, should give you a higher ranking on the stats, not lower, because like you have real life hands-on experience. I mean, like
Mhm.
maybe not all of them, but obviously you've got your bachelor's and your masters, and you have all this hands-on experience, and that puts you lower on the rung. Like that just seems ass backwards to me.
Yeah. And like I said, the HR generalist, like I think she really cared, and she wanted to get us in the door. But the problem was once she handed us over to the other side, which was the management side, it was up to them to put us in the right spots. And they really put us in spots that no one else wanted. And
Wow.
it was frustrating. I was very fortunate because I had a pretty good department. The guys that worked for me, they were a union, but they were overall, they were pretty fair, pretty honest guys. I respected them. They respected me. And one of the things that I did do, because I didn't have the technical knowledge, like I didn't understand how to read blueprints. I was kind of learning on the go. I was really at their mercy when it came to knowledge, and they knew it and I knew it. So all I really had to go on was respect. A lot of times in my meetings, whenever I would try to explain things, I would go back to my military experience, and I would talk about, hey, there was a time when this happened to me, and nobody told me to do it, but I did it on my own because it was the right thing to do. And but I would have those kind of conversations with them. So, and they I think that helped us see eye to eye, where they respected my experience because I would bring it up and talk about it. But that's all I had to go on. So I was fortunate on one hand to have the specific department that I had, because they really helped me out. Like they would tell me like straight up, like, look, this is wrong. This should be right. And they kept me there as long as I was there for a little while, but they're the reasons why I stayed as long as I did.
I mean, at least you had that. I mean, that's something to be.
Could have been
Yeah.
worse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Could have been worse.
And there was one supervisor there. I want to say this. There was one supervisor there. He was former Air Force. And to this day, I still talk to him. And he actually helped me out a lot. He was, his name was Kenny. He did his best to try to catch me up to speed on things. And so, yeah, it was very limited as far as the help.
To go from such a place where you're so supported to a place where you only have support here and there, it had to be hard. And it probably made you miss an aspect of that. So do you miss like parts of the military life and the brotherhood, or not so much anymore since it's been so long?
Yeah, so that's actually a really, really good question, because that's the hardest part right there, is when you get out and you realize that everything that you've been through in the military, the camaraderie and the reciprocity that you have with so many people is not necessarily on the civilian side. And if you really think that people out here care, I mean, people care, but they don't care as much as they should care about you making the sacrifice to join the military, because there's a lot of things that people don't take into account. about the military. Whether you deploy or not, you still make a lot of sacrifices of going places that you don't necessarily want to go, picking up and leaving your family behind, just the lifestyle in general. It's a very tough life to live, to be in the military, only because there's so much moving around, so much last minute things going on or whatever. It's 24/7 basically. You can get called to do anything 24/7. So when you get out within the first like few years, yeah, you miss it a lot. You think about like, oh, maybe I should. And some people do go back in. Either they go back in active duty or they go back in reserves, and because they do miss that part, that I mentioned, the camaraderie and the reciprocity that you once had. And in the military, you understand like what you're doing. You understand how everything works. So, and when you go out in the civilian side, things are so much more different. And I think that's the important message that for a lot of veterans to know today, was that when you get out of the military, you're going to have to learn how to fight for jobs, not like physically fight, but like you're going to have to learn how to be competitive. You're going to have to learn how to do things that were taught to people that rose through the ranks of that specific business that you're in, that you may not have learned.
Got to interview well and do all those things.
Exactly. And, here I am talking, and Connie was, I was talking earlier, and I didn't even realize that I was using jargon so much. And that's another thing too, is understanding like the level that, people know the jargon. That's challenging, because explaining what you did in the military, how does this apply? For me, for like when I wanted to get into sales, they're like, well, how, like, what, you have no sales experience. So what makes you think you would be good at this? If I was a 24 or a 27-year-old guy that had just been in the military and had these odd jobs in sales, I could go back and talk about that. But how do I, because when I was in Iraq, I led a transportation platoon out. Like, we literally go outside the wire. We would deliver like supplies, prisoners, people from base to base, which is pretty involved. There's a lot of logistics and a lot of like groundwork that goes into that. But how do I translate that into sales? Like, I spent the last 4 or 5 years doing this specific job over here. Meanwhile, like Johnny Rottencrotch, who, got out of college, got these little jobs here and there doing sales, he can go back and say like specifically how that links to the job he's applying for. But how do I do that? That's a challenge. There's no jobs in the military that do with sales. You have to figure out, how are you going to draw that line for that person that's going to interview you?
Yeah, and I'm sure that can't be easy, because there probably is ways, I'm sure. I mean, I don't know a lot about sales, but I'm sure there are ways that it does translate. It's just figuring out how it does translate and trying to explain it to somebody who doesn't understand, like you said, the jargon and all the military terms, to make it make sense to them.
Yeah, the headhunter helped me out quite a bit. I mean, because they put you through a few days of interviewing and talking about your resume, and they just told me straight up. They said, "Look, this is where I learned that I was behind the 8 ball." He, like, one of the guys that I spoke to, he goes, "Look, you looking at your resume here, you barely had a 3.0 coming out of college." Yeah, I finished college in 4 years. Like, man, that's mainly because when I joined the ROTC battalion, the lieutenant colonel at the time was like, "You will graduate in 4 years." And, most people take 4.5, 5 years sometimes. Right. So I was smashed. Like, I was literally working a 30-hour week. This is when I was in college, when I joined the ROTC program. I was working 30 hours a week, 25, 30 hours a week. I was in ROTC. I was doing my National Guard stuff. I was taking on average 20 credit hours per quarter. And I was doing physical fitness training 3 days a week. So
it's a lot.
And I was trying to party. So how do you fit those 5 things together? So my GPA was like right around a 3.0, and it wasn't the greatest thing. So when I got out of the military, the gentleman from the headhunter, he's like, "Look, you're behind the curve, because we've got people here that are like Naval Academy graduates, Air Force graduates, and West Point graduates, and they have backgrounds being pilots and being all these very technical jobs. So when you describe yourself, you need to describe yourself as a person that wasn't born with a silver spoon in your mouth. Like, you're the scrapper, like you're a fighter, like everything that and that was, he was right. Like, that's how I grew up. Like I wasn't given like the best situation domestically in my house, and I wasn't given the keys to the kingdom, you know, to go to college or whatever. So that's kind of how I had to describe myself for every interview.
Our college experience sounds very similar because I was in the ROTC program my first 2 years. I was working, going to school, trying to party, training in MMA. Looking back now, I don't even know how I did it all. I'm like, how did I get all that into one day? Because now I'm lucky if I can get everything done.
I know. Yeah, it was a lot, and I didn't realize it at the time, but like, looking back, you know, you kind of think about it like, wow, how did I get anything done? How did I even make it to class?
Yeah. How did I not oversleep and forget where I was going?
And like most, you know, guys, idiots like me or whatever, I was horrible at math. So every single math course that I took in college, I had to get a tutor. So there was a lot of times I'd get up at like 5 a.m. and go to, you know, see a tutor, you know. And so throw that into the mix, you know.
Dude, I can't tutor math at 5 a.m. My brain isn't even awake at 5 a.m.
I took help wherever I
2
could
plus
get
2?
it.
What?
Yeah, I took help wherever I could get it, man. You know.
Ugh, that's too early for math for my brain. I'd be like, I'd be better at like 8 o'clock at night. Can we meet at night?
Yeah.
That's why I was a history major. No
Yeah.
math.
I'm not good at math either. My original degree was going to be forensic science, and then I saw how much math it was, and I'm like, and let's change this.
To a Bachelor of Arts, right? Instead of Bachelor of Science.
No, I actually still do have a Bachelor of Science, but it's in kinesiology, less math.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the one thing that people actually don't get is that if you're getting a history degree, it's actually a bachelor's of science and not arts. So, KP, do you have any advice for our listeners that are interested in the military or are getting out of the military? Any advice?
Yeah, of course. I think, like I said earlier, make sure you network. If you're getting out of the military, network. Never forget about the people that go to bat for you. I can tell you this, over the span of my military career, I had a lot of people stick their neck out for me, go to bat for me. You know, whenever I got in trouble for this and that and something else, you know, like most people do, right? And every single obstacle that you have, a positive, negative experience, turn it into a blessing. There's been multiple times where I got in situations that were not ideal, but you keep driving on over those obstacles and you make the best you can with them. So that would be my number one thing. As far as like, if you're joining the military, I would highly suggest that you seek out someone who's in a situation that you want to be in. So if you want to be an officer, you want to go NCO, whatever, talk to someone who has been in those shoes and get advice from them.
And then they should be on your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If you're military and
Or on
transitioning
ours.
out, well, that too. But you know, if you're military and you're transitioning out, this is your
Right.
go-to guy right here.
That's it. The morning formation.
Did you know about Rietta's nonprofit?
So when I listened to the podcast with John, I heard something about that.
Yeah.
But I don't think you went into a lot of detail on that.
So Rietta, take it away.
Well, I don't talk about it a whole lot or tell people about it a lot because like we haven't launched yet. So it's still we're still in the workings, but I love that John is so passionate about it. And like, I literally had a call with him last week and he's like, let's go. Let's get this out. Let's go. And I'm like, I love you for it, but like, we're just not there yet. But that's our hope, is to help veterans do a lot of the things that we just talked about. My one board member, Keith, is actually really passionate about helping veterans or guys that are coming out finding jobs. Like, that's one of the things he's really passionate about. Because when he left the Army after 15 years, finding a good paying job was a struggle. He's a welder now. So now he's killing it. But I mean, it was a process getting there. So that's one of the things he wants to offer, or is eventually going to be one of the things that we offer, is helping people that are transitioning out of the military find employment. But our main focus is suicide, is curbing the suicides. Cause you know how one is too many, and I guess it did go down to 20. Supposedly it's not 22 a day anymore. It's 20. I don't know if that's true or not, but supposedly, but it needs to get lower than that. So that's eventually what we're going to be doing once we've actually launched.
Yeah, actually, even if it's 20, 22, whatever it is, if you think about it, like less than 10% of the United States population ever serve in the military. and that's a very small group of people. So to have 20 a day
Is insane.
is a big number compared to
Yeah.
that, because 90% never put on boots, never go in the military. So
Yeah. And
yeah.
like I said, one is too many. So
Oh yeah, definitely. But I could understand, like, even and that's the thing that I talk about as well, that I talked about on one of my podcasts was no, I think it was my YouTube. So I started out in YouTube and then I switched over to podcasting. But one of the things that I've talked about before is there's a lot of things. People always think that when it comes to PTSD and it comes to suicide and things of that nature, that it's always like something that happened overseas. It was a specific event. It was an explosion. It was, watching someone get killed or whatever. But I had a group of guys that worked for me who, I had 2 or 3 specifically, that when it came time to the end of our deployment, they literally were begging me. They were begging me to not send them home. They wanted to extend. They wanted to stay in Iraq for a much longer time. And I kept saying, I'll see what I can do. I see what I can do. And then finally I was like, why? Like, why do you guys I kind of knew. And what it had to do with was when they left their home, things were a certain way. They had a house, they had a dog, they had the white picket fence, they had the kids, and over the course of the year, they were either divorced or they were getting divorced or they had found something out about their spouse. So they were going to go home after doing this year of stress, anxiety, and dealing with, being apart. They were going to have to go home and face the music. So imagine what it would be like to go through that, to come home and thinking that, hey, when you get home, you're not going to come home to open arms. Like one guy expressed to me, he goes, yeah, when I get home, I'm going to have to move in with my parents and I got to put all my stuff in storage. Like that's going to be my welcome home, after being gone for a whole year. And then I got to figure out, this whole divorce thing and when am I going to be able to see my kids? And that's me
horrible.
Yeah. To me, like that's what people don't think about, people only think about, the things they see on movies and stuff, but there's a whole nother side of things where like, sometimes you can go over there and you can just lose yourself, lose everything that you thought you had, so.
yeah, you're sacrificing already so much for the country, and then you come home and you've lost
worse.
even more. Yeah, you've lost even more and it's worse. Yeah. So guys, make sure you listen to the Morning Formation podcast with Papa Kilo, which is KP's nickname. Or PK.
You know why, right? It's because if it was KP, it would be like Kilo Papa, but I flipped it around to PK, so Papa Kilo. But it's starting to get kind of weird because now when like people call me that I don't really know, call me Papa.
It's awkward.
I'm like, yeah, I don't know how I feel about that now. Sounded cool.
And then you regretted it.
And now you're regretting it. So the Morning Formation might be changing. It might just be the Morning Formation with KP from now on. But make sure you give it a listen. And if you are interested in being interviewed, make sure you reach out.
I appreciate that. And listen, I want to tell you this much too, Rieta. I met you in the Clubhouse forum, and it was kind of strange. Clubhouse, right? And so I gotta say this: I really appreciate all your help. I appreciate you. Like you were like the first person I could connect with and communicate with about this whole podcasting thing, because I don't have a lot of support like where I'm at. I can't talk to my buddies around here about podcasting, and they think I'm a weirdo. But and
I mean,
so,
we are weird. I mean, Connie and I are weird too. So let's be real.
I'm glad that weirdos can connect. And
Weirdos unite.
Weirdos unite. And so no, I just want to say thank you for everything. Thank you for the advice and just listening to like some things I bounce off you, like, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? So appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anytime. And thank you for being our guest. We're glad you are here. My
honor. And you two, by the way, you two have a special connection as well. Like I've listened to your podcast before, and the way you guys have your conversations is I find myself like laughing a lot, like, and just kind of smiling because it's cool.
I'm glad somebody laughs.
No,
that's our hope. We think we're funny.
Exactly.
It's actually how we started. Our original hashtag was two funny cousins. And we were like, no, two crazy cousins is more catchy because, it's at the two C's. I don't know. It just made more sense. So we actually
It's
started
true.
off as the funny cousins and then we just became crazy.
And then I think I just always said like, we're two crazy cousins doing whatever. So
Just stuck.
and then it stuck. And then I tried changing it up and it's all right. So I guess I'll do that closer that we always do. So this is how to deal when shit gets real. Check us out on YouTube now. We are now consistently posting on YouTube and all of the regular podcasting information. I hope you guys have enjoyed listening to KP's journey, and check us out every Friday.